and welcome to today's lesson on special right triangles. This is going to cover the standard 3.2 in geometry, and we're going to go over questions underneath the topic special right triangles in Study Island. So when we first start off, we're going to take some notes on the rule triangles for 30, 60, 90, and 45, 45, 90 triangles. Those are rule triangles you're going to have to have memorized, and every time you come to a problem that deals with 30, 60, 90 triangle or 45, 45, 90 triangle, I would copy that rule triangle down so that you have it to look at and you're not trying to remember it from your head. You'll be more successful that way. And remember, you can always, as you're taking notes, which I highly encourage you to do, you can always pause, rewind, or fast forward so you can stay caught up with us. And then you can also pause at the beginning of a question, work that question out, and then start watching again to see how well you do and see if you need more practice or if you're getting these problems. So I'm excited that you're here, and let's go ahead and take those notes. Here are our rule triangles. We have the 45, 45, 90 triangle, and because these two angles are the same, the sides across for them are also the same. That's why they're both labeled X. Now these are the legs of the right triangle, so they're the same no matter what. And then the hypotenuse is always the square root of 2 times the leg value. And then we have our 30, 60, 90 triangle. So the leg across from the 30 is always going to be our shortest leg, so we call that the short leg. And then the leg across from the 60 is going to be the longer leg because it's across from the bigger angle, so we call that the long leg. And then across from the 90, our right angle is our hypotenuse. And so the short leg, that's what we're going to start with. We just call that one the value of X, and then the long leg is the value of our short leg. Take that number times the square root of 3, and that gives you the length of the long leg. And then to get the value of the hypotenuse, you're going to take 2 times the short leg number. So we'll go over some examples that will hopefully help those make more sense. But these are the rule triangles that you need to have memorized so that when you're taking your EOI or doing these problems in your curriculum, you can just copy them down and you're ready to work them out. This first triangle is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and even though it doesn't have 45 written in these corners, I know that these two angles are congruent, and I know this is a right triangle. So the only way for us to have a right triangle with the other two angles being equal or congruent is for it to be a 45, 45, 90 triangle. This question here is asking, what is the measure of angle MNO? So if I trace that MNO, it's talking about this angle right here. And so we just went over, that angle is going to be 45 degrees. So your answer here is C. This one is also asking, what is the measure of angle MNO? And so I have the hypotenuse and I have one of the legs, and I'm looking here, and I see my choices. It's going to be one of the special right triangles. So in order to decide which one it is, I'm going to have to use Pythagorean theorem to find this missing leg. So Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And here I have a leg and my missing leg, and then C is my hypotenuse. So I'm going to have 3 squared plus, and then b squared is what I'm looking for. And then I have 3 square roots of 2 for C, and all of that is being squared. It's always a good idea to use parentheses around what it is you substitute in. So I'm going to go ahead and square those numbers. Here I'm going to have 3 times 3 for 3 squared, which is 9, and then I have my b squared. And then here we're going to have to square both the 3 and the square roots of 2. So 3 squared is 9. And then when you square a square root, the square root and the square just cancel out because they're opposite operations. So you're just left with 2. So then 9 times 2 is 18. And now I'm just going to continue to solve for b. I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides. These 9's cancel out, and that leaves me with b squared equals, and then 18 minus 9 is 9. And then that's what b squared equals. So to get rid of that squared, I have to take the square root of both sides. And then once again, the square root and the square cancel because they're opposite operations, and that leaves me with b equals, and the square root of 9 is 3. So this side here is 3. So if I think back to my rule triangles, having a triangle that has the same legs, and then the hypotenuse being the leg times the square root of 2, that was my 45, 45, 90 triangle. So if I look at the angle MNO, which is this angle right here, that's going to be 45 degrees. So my answer is B. So number 3 here says the hypotenuse of a 45, 45, 90 triangle measures 6 inches. What is the length of each leg? So now I'm finding a length of a side. So I'm going to go ahead and write down my rule triangle. And so now it wants to know what is the length of the leg. So I'm going to go ahead and put a question mark here. And I know that this hypotenuse is equal to 6. So I'm going to set that equal to 6. So now I have an equation that I've gone ahead and set up. And if I solve this for x, then I'm going to know the leg. So I'm going to go down here and just copy it over. X times the square root of 2 equals 6. To solve that for x, I'm going to divide both sides by the square root of 2. These cancel out, and I'm just left with x equals 6 over the square root of 2. Now, this isn't considered the most simplified version. If you have a calculator, I highly recommend the TI-30XS. You can put this in the calculator and press enter, and it gives you the answer. So if you don't have a TI-30XS or a similar calculator that will do that, I highly recommend that you get one. They're under $20. But if you need to do it by hand, this is how you would do it. We're not allowed to have square roots in the bottom, so to get the square root of the bottom, you have to multiply the top and the bottom of the fraction by that square root. And so here you get 6 times the square root of 2 in the top, and then the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is 2. And then I can reduce out regular numbers, outside numbers with outside numbers, so I can reduce 6 and 2, which is 3. And I'm left with 3 square roots of 2, so my answer here is B. This problem reads, one leg of a 45, 45, 90 triangle measures 6 inches. What is the length of the other leg? Well, in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, my legs are the same length. So if one is 4, the other one's 4. So my answer here is going to be B, and I don't have to do any calculations because I remembered that the legs are equal in a 45, 45, 90 triangle. This question here is the hypotenuse of a 30, 60, 90 triangle measures 12 inches. What is the length of the longer leg? So the first thing I'm going to do is copy down my rule triangle. Then I'm going to label what I know. So I know the hypotenuse is 12. So I'm going to set that part of the rule triangle equal to 12. And I want to know what is the length of the longer leg. Well, in order to know the length of the longer leg, the one across from 60 degrees, I'm going to have to know what that x value is. Well, I can solve this equation here for x. So I'm going to do that by dividing both sides by 2. I just rewrote it over here so we had room to solve. The 2's cancel, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So x is 6. So that means my short leg is 6, but I need to take it one step further and put in 6 for x. So my answer here is 6 square root of 3, which is letter C. Okay, this question here is combining a 30, 60, 90 triangle and a 45, 45, 90 triangle. So if I got this question on a test, the first thing I would do is to copy this figure down so that I can start labeling things like I'm going to do on the screen. So first thing is I know x is 6. So I'm going to put 6 here by x so that I know that that's a 6. Okay, and then also because these two triangles are going to be congruent by the side angle side theorem. So because they have a shared side, so that gives me one side pair. They have the angles here are both right triangles or right angles. And then here, these two sides are also congruent. So that gives me side angle side to know that these two are going to be exactly the same. So if these angles here are also going to be 45 degrees. So I know that these are both 45, 45, 90 triangles. And this one here is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And it wants to know what the perimeter is. So that means I'm going to have to fill in what all of these other sides are. So the first thing I'm going to look at is, I'm just going to start with this top triangle. I know this side's 6. But I need to find out the hypotenuse here, and my rule triangle for a 45, 45, 90 triangle shows me that I'm going to take the leg times the square root of 2 to get that hypotenuse. So here, this is going to be 6 square roots of 2. All right, and then because those two triangles are congruent, this hypotenuse is also 6 square roots of 2. And that just leaves me to find these two missing pieces. So I know the short side of a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So if I look at that rule triangle, I know the short side, so that means I know x. And so that means to figure out my hypotenuse, I'm going to take 2 times my short side, or 2 times 6 here, which is 12. And then to find out my long side, I'm going to take the short side times square root of 3, which is 6 here, so it's going to be 6 square roots of 3. And then I'm just going to have to add up all of my sides. So I'm going to take 6 plus 6 square root of 2 plus 6 square root of 2 plus 12 plus 6 square root of 3. So written out, that looks like this. And I always like to double check. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers to make sure I didn't miss any. And so you can, once again, if you have that TI-30XS or similar calculator, you can plug this straight in and it will give you your answer over here. If not, you have to know that you can only combine regular numbers with regular numbers and then similar square roots with similar square roots. So I can add these two. And so when I add those, I add the outside numbers. So 6 plus 6 is 12, and then I just keep the square root of 2. Just like adding like terms with the variables. And then so I can't combine that with the square root of 3 because they're not like terms. It's the fact they have two different numbers underneath here make them different. And then I can add the 6 and the 12, and that gives me 18. So this is my final answer, which is letter D. Okay, this example says a kite store has a kite tethered to the top of a 6-foot pole at the beach. The kite is flying at a height h of 174 feet above the ground. The angle between the string and the ground is 60 degrees. What is the length of the kite string L? So I've already copied down my rule triangle for a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And I'm just going to go ahead and complete this triangle here and fill in what I know. So first of all, I know I'm looking for L. And I have H here from the kite all the way to the ground is 174 feet. And I also know that this is a 6-foot pole. But if I'm looking at just the triangle, I don't want to factor in the height of the pole. I want from the pole to the kite I want to find that height. So I'm going to have to subtract 6 from this 174, which is 168. So my height here is 168. And that's going to be my long leg that I use to find my hypotenuse. It's the long leg because it's across from that 60 degrees. In order to find that hypotenuse, though, I need to know the value of x. So my long leg, that rule in my rule triangle is x square root of 3. So I'm going to set those equal to each other. And then I'm going to go ahead and solve for x. So here I divide both sides by the square root of 3 so that those cancel out and I'm left just with x. And then 168 divided by the square root of 3 is 56 square root of 3. So that's my x value, which is the short leg, but I need to know the hypotenuse, the one across from the right angle. So that means to find the hypotenuse, I take this x value and multiply it by 2 according to my rule triangle. So I'm going to take 56 square roots of 3 times 2, and I multiply that 2 just with the outside number because I can only multiply outside numbers and then with outside numbers and then numbers under the square root with numbers under the square root. So 56 times 2 is 112, and that stays the square root of 3, and that's going to be my final answer, which is D. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you learned something new.